buying your first home is one of the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make.
But let me tell you something. If you don't have a plan before you even think about house hunting, you're setting yourself up for a world of trouble.
It's not just about picking out a place to live. It's about securing your financial future. Too many people walk into this process without a clear strategy and end up overwhelmed with debt, struggling to pay their mortgage, or worse, losing the home they worked so hard to buy. Don't let that be you.
First things first, this isn't a race. I know there's a lot of pressure out there, especially with social media making everyone's life look picture perfect and people flashing their dream homes. Let me tell you something. Your dream home doesn't have to be a mansion with granite countertops and hardwood floors. In fact, when you're buying your first house, it shouldn't be. The most important thing is that you're making a smart financial decision. This home, this one investment is the foundation on which you will build your future. If you're not careful, it can also be the anchor that drags you down.
Now, I know what you're thinking, but Dave, I just want to get in the market. I need to buy a house before prices go up. Listen, you're not playing a game of Monopoly here. This is real life. If you don't have your ducks in a row, you're going to end up making a mistake that will haunt you for years. So what does that mean for you? It means you have to start with a solid plan, a clear financial strategy that sets you up for success. And that strategy begins with 3 simple but crucial steps: saving for a down payment, getting your credit in check, and understanding exactly what you can afford. Let's talk about saving first. You cannot buy a house unless you have a down payment. This is non-negotiable. If you think you can get away with just putting 3 down or using a 0 down loan, you're setting yourself up for disaster. I'm sorry, but that's not how you build wealth. That's how you build debt. Saving up 20 for a down payment is the goal. That's the gold standard. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to sacrifice. You may have to cut back on things you like: dining out, vacations, shopping sprees. But let me tell you this. A few years of sacrifice now will pay off in the long run. And here's the kicker. If you can't save for a down payment, then you can't afford to buy a house. Period. You need to be realistic with yourself and start saving. If that means taking a second job, cutting back on your lifestyle, or getting rid of some debt, then do it. Your future self will thank you. The next thing you need to do is get your credit in check. If you're carrying around credit card debt, student loans, or any other form of debt that's dragging down your credit score, it's time to take action. No, you do not want to carry that debt into homeownership. You'll pay higher interest rates, which means you'll pay more for your home over time. This is where a lot of people get into trouble. Think about it. You get approved for a loan based on your credit, but because you have all the other debt, you're stretched thin every month just to pay your bills. You don't have room for emergencies or for things like repairs or maintenance.
That's a nightmare waiting to happen. So what do you need to do? Pay off that debt?
If you have credit cards maxed out, pay them down. Pay off student loans or any other debt that's holding you back. And I'm going to tell you something you may not want to hear. Don't take on any more debt. If you're thinking about buying furniture or getting a new car before you buy your house, don't hold off. You need to clean up your credit before you make this move. Now, let's talk about affordability. I know. Everyone wants the big house. You want the granite countertops, the walk, in closet, the 2-car garage. But you don't need that right now. Trust me, you need a home that you can comfortably afford. I'm talking about a mortgage payment that's no more than 25 your take home pay. Nothing more. Not 30, not 40. If you stretch yourself beyond that, you're going to put yourself in a tough spot.
Remember, you're buying a house to live in, not to impress anyone. If you're buying a home that's too big, too expensive, you're not buying for the right reasons. And that's when people get into trouble.
So do yourself a favor. Get pre-approved for a mortgage loan. Know what your budget is and stick to it. This is not the time to go house hunting without a clear understanding of what you can afford. Finally, I want you to remember that buying your first home is not just a one-time decision. It's a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a solid plan in place, you're going to end up with buyer's remorse.
You'll be stuck with a mortgage you can't afford, and you'll feel trapped in a home that doesn't fit your needs. That's why it's critical to take your time, to plan, to save, and to get your finances in order.
This isn't something you rush into. Take it slow. Do it the right way. Trust me, the peace of mind you'll have when you close on that house with the right financial plan in place will be worth every ounce of effort you put in to get there. So before you even think about buying a house, sit down, make a plan, and take it one step at a time. Trust the process, trust yourself, and stick to your goals. If you do that, you'll not only buy your first home, you'll buy it with confidence, and you'll be in a great position to build wealth for years to come.
Look, buying your first home isn't just about finding the perfect house or having a down payment saved up. It's about managing your money wisely. And I'm going to be honest with you. If you don't have a budget in place, you're setting yourself up for failure. You wouldn't take a road trip without a map.
Right.
So why in the world would you buy a house without a clear plan for your finances?
The first step in buying a house isn't looking at Zillow or driving around neighborhoods. It's sitting down and making a detailed budget that takes into account every penny you're bringing in and every penny you're bringing in and every penny you're spending. I know some of you are thinking, I don't need a budget. I'm doing fine. But let me tell you something. If you can't tell me exactly where your money is going every month, then you don't have control of your finances, and you definitely don't have control of this home buying process. So let's talk about why budgeting is so critical and how you can make sure you stick to it. First things first, when you're planning to buy a home, you've got to get a clear picture of where your money is going. That means tracking every dollar, not just the big expenses, but the little ones too. The $5 coffee here, the $20 lunch there. All of that adds up, and you'd be surprised how quickly those small expenses can erode your ability to save and stick to your budget.
If you don't have a budget, I can guarantee you'll be overspending without even realizing it. And that's the last thing you need when you're trying to save for a house.
So grab a piece of paper, open an Excel sheet, or use one of the many budgeting apps out there and start tracking every single dollar you bring in and every dollar that goes out. Yes, it takes effort, but it's the only way to get your finances under control and prepare for this big purchase. You need to know exactly where you stand financially.
Now, I want to talk about the most important part of the budget, your monthly expenses. This is where most people mess up. They think they can afford a big house because they're looking at their income without factoring in their monthly expenses.
But the truth is, you can't afford a house if you're not looking at the full picture. You need to account for things like groceries, utilities, gas, insurance, and especially your debt payments. If you're carrying debt, whether it's credit cards, car loans, or student loans, that's money that's going out every month. If you're living paycheck to paycheck now, what makes you think you're going to be able to add a mortgage to that mix without drowning in debt?
You won't. And this is where budgeting comes into play. By tracking your expenses, you can see exactly how much you're spending on non-essential stuff and how much you have left over to save for your down payment and future home expenses.
One thing I always tell people is start with the basics. Sit down and figure out how much you're spending on things like housing, food, transportation, and entertainment. Cut out any unnecessary expenses. Trust me, you don't need to be going out to eat 3 nights a week when you're saving for a home. You don't need the newest iPhone or the latest designer clothes. And don't even think about getting a car loan or adding more debt to your plate before you buy a house. That's a recipe for disaster. Cut back on things that aren't helping you reach your goal of buying a home. I've seen too many people stretch themselves thin trying to keep up with the Joneses, and then they get into a home they can't afford because they weren't disciplined with their spending. But budgeting isn't just about cutting back. It's also about being intentional with your money. And part of that is setting up a savings plan for your down payment. You've got to make it a priority. If you're serious about buying a house, you need to dedicate
a chunk of your monthly income to that goal. And I'm talking about a big chunk, not just a few dollars here and there. Put your down payment savings on the top of your list of priorities. Every time you get paid, take a percentage of that paycheck and put it straight into your savings account. Even if it's just 10 at first, start somewhere and make it automatic if you can. Set up automatic transfers from your checking account to your savings account. This is how you build momentum. Over time, you'll start to see your savings grow. And the closer you get to that 20 down payment, the more excited you're going to be about this whole process. But it starts with discipline. But there's another part of budgeting that most people overlook, understanding the long-term costs of owning a home. I want you to be real about this. It's not just the mortgage payment. There are things like property taxes, homeowners insurance, maintenance, repairs, and utilities. And I'm not talking about the fun things like buying new furniture or decorating your living room. I'm talking about the real gritty stuff, the leaky roof, the broken furnace, the plumbing problems. These are things that you need to account for when you're building your budget. When you buy a home, you're stepping into a whole new level of responsibility. It's not all about the excitement of closing day. It's about what happens the day after you move in. And if you haven't planned for the long-term cost, you'll be caught off guard.
So how do you stick to this budget once you've created it? The answer is simple: discipline. You've got to be ruthless with your spending. You've got to say no to things that aren't helping you reach your goal.
This means making sacrifices, short-term sacrifices that are going to pay off big in the long run. And let me tell you, there is no greater feeling than seeing that house come to life because you made the right financial decisions along the way.
But I also want to remind you that this isn't forever. You're not going to live like this for the rest of your life. Once you get into that home, once you get that mortgage paid off and start building equity, you'll start seeing the rewards, and it'll feel so good. So sit down, take control of your budget, and make your money work for you. You have the power to make this happen, but it all starts with a plan and the discipline to stick to it. Buying your first home doesn't have to be a financial burden. It can be the beginning of your wealth building journey, but only if you take the time to budget, plan, and stick to the course.
Let's get real for a minute. If you want to buy your first home and actually be able to enjoy it without drowning in stress and worry, you have to get rid of your debt before you even think about getting that mortgage.
And I know some of you are already rolling your eyes thinking, Dave, you're always talking about debt. Well, let me tell you something. I talk about debt because it's one of the biggest roadblocks to your financial future, especially when it comes to buying a home.
And if you're carrying debt, whether that's credit card debt, student loans, car payments, or anything else, it's like you're trying to drive a car with the emergency brake on. You're not going anywhere fast.
Here's the cold, hard truth. When you buy a house, you're taking on a huge financial responsibility. This isn't like buying a new car or going on a vacation.
A mortgage is a long-term commitment, and if you're already buried in debt before you even start this journey, you're making things way harder on yourself than they need to be.
Think about it. Your monthly budget is already stretched thin because of your car payment or that ever-growing credit card bill, and now you're going to throw a mortgage into the mix.
That's not a smart move. If you're not careful, you could end up in financial ruin, and that's not the kind of life I want for you. So what do? You pay off your debt. That's right. Get rid of it one step at a time before you even think about buying a home. Let's talk about the first step here. You need to get focused. You can't just half-heartedly work on your debt and expect to see results.
No.
You need a plan. The first thing I want you to do is get on a debt snowball.
If you're unfamiliar with this concept, here's how it works. List all your debts, starting with the smallest balance, and throw every spare dollar you have at that smallest debt.
You're not worried about interest rates right now. You're focused on getting that first debt out of your life completely. Once that first debt is paid off, you move on to the next one and then the next one, And then the next, as you pay off each debt, you gain momentum, just like a snowball rolling downhill. It starts to pick up speed, and before you know it, you'll have cleared out a whole pile of debts. Now, let me give you a tip. Don't get sidetracked. I know it's tempting to start putting money aside for your down payment or going out to look at houses while you're still in debt, but that's not how you win.
No, you need to focus. Every single dollar you can find should go toward getting rid of your debt. And I don't care if it's a tax refund, a bonus at work, or selling things around the house you don't need.
You'd it all to get that out of your life. The faster you get rid of it, the sooner you can start saving for your down payment and the better position you'll be in to buy a house.
And here's why this is so important. Debt is expensive. When you're paying credit card interest or those high monthly car payments, you're throwing away money that could be building your wealth. Do you know what your monthly credit card payment could look like if you stop making those payments and put that money towards saving for a home instead? Think about the difference it would make. You could have a bigger down payment, lower monthly payments, and get into a house you actually can afford. Instead of living paycheck to paycheck, constantly worrying about your bills, you could be in a place where your money is working for you, not against you. Getting rid of your debt is the only way to free up your finances and really start building the life you want. Now, I know some of you are sitting there thinking, but Dave, I've got student loans. I've got a mortgage on my rental property. I've got a lot of debt. How am I supposed to get it all paid off? Well, let me tell you something. I've seen it done, and I've seen it done, and I've seen it done fast. If you're willing to sacrifice and make some tough decisions, you can pay off your debt faster than you think. But you have to be all in. That means no more fancy dinners out, no more vacations, and no more vacations, and no more buying things you don't need. You need to get serious about getting out of debt. Make it your number one priority and do whatever it takes to get there. It's not going to be easy, but it will be worth it. Let me give you a couple of real life examples. I had a couple come to me not too long ago. They had a ton of credit card debt, student loans, and car payments. They were stuck in a cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, and every month they were barely scraping by.
They were scared they'd never be able to buy a home because their debt was overwhelming. But we worked together and they got on a plan. They started selling stuff they didn't need, cut their expenses to the bone, and put everything they had into paying off their debt.
It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fun. But guess what? They did it. They paid off their debt, built their emergency fund, and were able to buy a house they could actually afford. No stress, no financial worry. Just peace of mind knowing they were debt-free and ready to move forward. That could be you. But you have to make the decision. You have to get intentional about eliminating your debt. When you do that, you'll be able to take control of your financial future. And let me tell you something. When you finally walk into that new house, mortgage-free and debt-free, there is no greater feeling in the world. You'll feel like you're on top of the world. And that's exactly where you should be. So don't wait. Don't put it off. Start today. Make a plan. Get focused. Get out of debt. And when you're ready to buy your house, you'll be financially prepared and completely at peace. Trust me, it's worth the work. Your future self will thank you.
Now listen up. You're on the right path, and I'm proud of you for sticking with this. But there's one more crucial step you need to take before you even think about buying that first home. You've got to build up an emergency fund.
Now, I know some of you might be thinking, Dave, I just got out of debt. Why do I need an emergency fund? Let me tell you, if you don't take care of this step, you could end up right back where you started, struggling financially. And trust me, that's not where you want to be.
Buying a house is one of the biggest financial commitments you'll ever make in your life. And you need to have a safety net in place to protect yourself. That's where the emergency fund comes in.
Think of it this way. When life throws you a curveball, and it will, you need to have the money ready to handle it. Because if you don't, you're going to have to rely on credit cards or loans to get you through. And we know what that does. More debt more stress, and more problems. So I'm going to tell you straight up, you need to have at least 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up in an emergency fund before you buy your home.
That's the minimum. And that emergency fund isn't for vacations, a new car, or even home improvements. This is money set aside for life's unexpected events, medical bills, job loss, a home repair that catches you by surprise.
If you don't have this money saved up, you're living dangerously. Yay! Give you an example. I had a young couple come to me not too long ago. They were excited about buying their first home, but they didn't have an emergency fund. They had the down payment saved up, but they had no buffer for any kind of unexpected costs.
About a month before they were ready to close on their new home, one of them lost their job. Now they had a choice. They could either walk away from the home they had already put a deposit on, or they could panic and start racking up credit card debt to make ends meet. Fortunately, they had a solid emergency fund. They didn't panic. They were able to pay their bills, keep up with the mortgage payments, and get through the tough time without going into debt.
Without that emergency fund, they might have lost the house, and all the progress they made could have been wiped out. That's why this step is so important. It's not just about saving money. It's about protecting your future and your peace of mind. You don't want to be in a situation where you're one unexpected bill away from financial ruin. And trust me, life is going to throw things your way. Your car is going to break down. The roof is going to leak. Someone in your family is going to get sick. You can't predict these things, but you can prepare for them.
And the only way to prepare is by building that emergency fund. So let's break this down. You've paid off your debt. You've got that momentum going. Now it's time to focus on building that emergency fund. Start with baby steps. If you're living paycheck to paycheck right now, I understand. It can feel overwhelming. But I promise you, if you take it one step at a time, you'll get there. Start by setting a small goal. Maybe it's $1,000. Once you've hit that, you can build it up to 3 months of expenses and then work towards 6 months. You don't need to do it all at once, but you need to start now.
And when you're building that emergency fund, don't go out and spend money on non-essential things. You don't need a new flat screen TV. You don't need to take a trip to Hawaii. Put every extra dollar you can into your emergency fund until you hit that goal.
If you're tempted to dip into it for something that's not an emergency, you need to take a step back and remind yourself why you're doing this. That fund is for emergencies only, and if you use it for emergencies only, and if you use it for anything else, you're defeating the whole purpose. Stay focused, stay disciplined, and watch that fund grow. The more you put into it, the more peace of mind you'll have when life inevitably throws you a curveball. Once you've got that emergency fund in place, you're going to feel like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders. No more worrying about what's going to happen if the car breaks down or if you lose your job. You'll be able to move forward with your plans to buy a home without the constant fear of what could go wrong. But here's the kicker. You're not done. Once you've got that emergency fund, you've set yourself up for success.
But remember, this is just the beginning. You're building a foundation for a stable financial future, and that foundation is going to carry you through the ups and downs of life.
So let me ask you this. How would you feel if you had 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up, completely free of debt, and ready to take the next step in your home buying journey?
How would you feel knowing that you have a safety net in place, no matter what life throws at you?
That's the kind of security I want for you. That's the kind of peace of mind that comes from doing things the right way.
No more stress. No more living paycheck to paycheck. No more worrying about what could go wrong. With an emergency fund in place, you can move forward with confidence.
But it's up to you. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen without sacrifice. But if you're willing to put in the work,
build that emergency fund and set yourself up for success, then buying your first home won't just be a dream. It will be a reality. And it'll be a reality you can enjoy without the fear of financial chaos. You're doing this the smart way, the right way. Keep your eye on the prize, stay focused, and get that emergency fund built.
Once it's in place, you'll be ready for whatever life throws your way.
In this section, I've continued to follow Dave Ramsey's straightforward, no nonsense style, focusing on the importance of having an emergency fund in place before purchasing a home. This section stresses the necessity of preparation, discipline, and prioritizing long-term financial security over short-term desires. It's about ensuring peace of mind and not rushing into a big financial decision like buying a house until you're fully prepared for life's curveballs.
All right, now that you've got your down payment ready, your emergency fund in place, and you're feeling confident, it's time to talk about something that's often overlooked by first-time home buyers, the mortgage pre-approval process.
Let me tell you, if you skip this step, you're asking for trouble. I've seen it time and time again. Folks go out, fall in love with a house, get all excited only to find out they're not approved for enough to buy it.
That's heartbreaking. And I don't want that to happen to you.
So here's the deal. Before you even think about starting the home search, you need to get pre-approved for a mortgage.
Let me walk you through why this is absolutely essential and why you can't afford to skip it.
First of all, let me say this. Pre-approval letter is not just a piece of paper. It's your ticket to getting the right house at the right price. It tells sellers, hey, I'm serious. I'm ready. I've got the financial backing to buy this house. Without that pre-approval letter, you're just another person dreaming about buying a home. But with it, you're showing that you've already taken the time to figure out how much house you can afford, and you've got a lender on your side who's willing to back you up. This puts you in a whole different league when it comes to house hunting.
Now, some of you may be thinking, Dave, I've got good credit. I'm sure I can get a loan without any problems. Well, that's great, but just because you think you can get a loan doesn't mean the lender is going to agree with you. The truth is, the mortgage approval process isn't just about your credit score. Lenders look at a whole bunch of things: your income, your debt, your job history, your savings, and yes, your credit score.
All of these factors come together to determine how much money you're eligible to borrow and what your interest rate will be. So getting pre-approved lets you know exactly where you stand.
Let me give you an example. I had a couple come to me last year, super excited to buy their first home. They had saved up enough for a decent down payment, and they thought they were in a good spot financially.
They didn't bother getting pre-approved because they felt confident they would be approved.
Well, guess what? When they finally went to apply for a mortgage, they were shocked.
Their credit score wasn't as high as they thought, and their debt to income ratio was too high for them to qualify for the loan they wanted. The house they had fallen in love with was way out of their reach. They ended up having to settle for a much smaller home, and they were disappointed. That's the problem when you don't get pre-approved. It's like setting yourself up for failure before you even get started.
On the other hand, when you get pre-approved, you're setting yourself up for success. You'll know exactly what you can afford and what's in your price range. This means no more guessing.
No more wandering around looking at homes you can't afford. Pre-approval helps you stay focused, stay realistic, and stay within your budget. And let me tell you, that's crucial. The last thing you want is to buy a home that's way above your means.
You don't want to be house poor where you're putting all your money into your mortgage and not having enough for anything else. That's how people end up in trouble. That's how people end up in trouble living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by.
But let me tell you, being pre-approved for a mortgage doesn't just help you, it also helps you stand out as a serious buyer.
In a competitive market where homes are flying off the market left and right, sellers aren't just looking for any offer. They're looking for a solid offer from a buyer who's ready to move. When they see that pre-approval letter, they know you're not just window shopping, you're ready to make a deal. That could be the difference between you getting the house you want and losing it to someone else. In some cases, a seller may even accept your offer over another because they know your financing is already lined up. And this doesn't just apply to first-time home buyers. Even seasoned buyers need pre-approval. It's a good practice to check in with your lender every few years to see where you stand financially. The market changes, interest rates change, and your financial situation changes. You need to be up to date with your pre-approval status so that when the right home comes along, you're ready to act fast. So let me break this down for you. What does it take to get pre-approved? It's a pretty straightforward process, but don't expect it to be a 5-minute task. First, you'll need to sit down with a lender and provide them with all the financial documents, pay stubs, tax returns, bank statements, and proof of assets. They'll also pull your credit report to get a snapshot of your financial health. Once they have all of this, they'll crunch the numbers and determine how much they're willing to lend you. This process usually takes a few days, but it's totally worth it. At the end of it, you'll walk away with that pre-approval letter knowing exactly how much house you can afford and what your monthly payments will look like. Now, once you get that pre-approval letter, don't go out there and start overspending just because you think you can afford more. Stick to your budget. A pre-approval doesn't mean you should max out your loan. It's a guideline, not a green light to go crazy. Remember, just because the bank says you can afford a $350,000 house doesn't mean that's what you should buy. Be smart. Don't forget why you're doing this. You're building a stable financial future. Don't let the excitement of buying your first home cloud your judgment. Here's what I want you to take away from all this. Getting pre-approved is not optional. It's a necessary step that will set you up for success. It's not just about getting a loan. It's about getting the right loan for you. It's about knowing where you stand and sticking to your financial goals. So, before you start touring homes, pick up the phone and talk to a lender. Get pre-approved. Do it early in the process. And once you've got that pre-approval, you'll be ready to go out there and find the right home for you and your family. And trust me, when you get that pre-approval, you're going to feel a lot more confident walking into that first house. It's a game changer. All right, you've made it this far. You've saved up for your down payment. You've done your homework. You've gotten pre-approved for your mortgage, and now you're ready to buy your first home. But let me tell you something. There's one last crucial thing that too many first-time home buyers overlook, and it could come back to bite you if you're not careful. The total cost of home ownership, it's not just about the mortgage payment. It's not just about the down payment. There's a lot more to think about, and if you ignore these costs, you're setting yourself up for some serious financial stress down the road. So let's break it down because I want you to be fully prepared before you take that big leap. When you think about buying a home, the first thing that comes to mind is probably that mortgage payment. And yes, that's a big part of it. But let me tell you something. There's so much more involved than just that monthly payment. If you only budget for the mortgage and nothing else, you're going to find yourself struggling to make ends meet. And that's no way to live. There are so many hidden costs in home ownership that people don't think about until it's too late. And trust me, I don't want that to happen to you.
Let's start with the basics, property taxes. If you're renting, you probably haven't had to deal with property taxes, but when you own a home, it's a whole different ballgame. Property taxes can vary greatly depending on where you live, but in some areas, they can be a significant portion of your monthly housing costs. Some people get caught off guard by this.
They assume that their mortgage payment is the only thing they need to worry about, and then they get hit with a big tax bill. The reality is you need to factor property taxes into your monthly budget.
And if you're not sure how much that will be, ask your real estate agent or lender for an estimate based on the home you're buying. Be sure to budget for those taxes because they're not going away. Next up, let's talk about homeowners insurance. This is another thing that people often forget to include when they're budgeting for a home. If you're getting a loan, your lender is going to require you to have insurance, but just because it's required doesn't mean it's cheap. Homeowners insurance can vary widely based on where you live, the size and age of the home, and other factors. But don't make the mistake of only shopping for the bare minimum insurance. You need to make sure that you're adequately covered. A major disaster, like a fire or a natural disaster, could destroy everything you've worked so hard for, and without the right coverage, you could be left with nothing. Don't skimp on this. Shop around for insurance and make sure you have enough coverage to protect yourself.
And then there's maintenance.
Oh boy, this is a big one. When you're renting, if something breaks, you just call your landlord. But when you own a home, you're the one responsible for everything. You're the one who's going to need to fix that leaky roof, replace the HVAC system, or repair the plumbing when it goes out. The rule of thumb here is that you should budget about one of your home's purchase price each year for maintenance.
So if you buy a $200,000 house, you should expect to spend around $2,000 a year on maintenance. That might sound like a lot, but let me tell you, it's much better to be prepared for these costs than to get blindsided by them when something goes wrong.
And don't forget about utilities. When you rent, utilities might be included, but when you own a home, you're on the hook for everything. Water, electricity, gas. These bills can add up quickly.
The size of the house, the efficiency of the appliances, and the climate you live in can all affect your utility costs. So before you buy a home, take an honest look at how much it will cost to run the house every month.
Budget for your utilities, and don't forget to account for things like trash collection, sewer fees, and even homeowner association. Fees if your home is in a community that charges them. And speaking of HOA fees, if you're looking at a home in a neighborhood with a homeowners association, make sure you understand what those fees cover and how much they'll cost you.
Some HOA fees can be pretty steep, and they're often an ongoing expense that you'll need to factor into your budget. The benefit of an HOA is that they maintain the common areas, which can help keep your property value up. But that comes at a cost. Make sure that cost fits into your budget before you commit to buying a home in a HOA. Now let's talk about the long-term financial picture. A lot of first-time buyers are so focused on getting into the home that they don't think about what it'll take to stay in that home over the years.
You've got to think about how your financial situation will change. Are you planning on having kids? Do you have plans to change jobs or move? What about your retirement?
Home ownership is a long-term commitment, and it's important to consider how your current financial situation might change in the future. Will you still be able to afford the house if interest rates go up? What if you lose your job or face other unexpected expenses? That's why it's so important to have a solid emergency fund and a budget that accounts for your long-term goals.
Don't buy a house that puts you at risk of financial stress in the future.
And make sure you can still afford to put money into retirement, because you don't want to be stuck in a house you can't afford and have nothing saved for retirement. So here's what I want you to take away from all this. Home ownership is more than just a mortgage payment. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. It's a financial responsibility. And if you're not prepared for the full cost of home ownership, you're setting yourself up for stress, debt, and disappointment.
I want you to live comfortably in your new home without the constant worry of hidden costs and unexpected bills.
So before you buy, make sure you've accounted for everything. The property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, the utilities, the whole fees, and all the other little costs that come with owning a home.
And remember, just because you can afford the mortgage doesn't mean you can afford the house. You got a plan for everything. Don't let the excitement of owning your first home cloud your judgment.
Be realistic and be prepared